Hey, Starkey Baptist Church, good morning and welcome to Pastor Brandon's office here. Before we dive into our Tuesday devotional, we have a really important announcement that we want to make for you guys. This week on Thursday from 5 o'clock to 6:30, we're going to be having our first ever Starkey Baptist Church drive-through dinner. What we're going to be doing is we're going to be giving you a night off and giving you dinner, a hot dog and chip dinner on us as a church. What we want is for you to come onto campus, to drive through. We want to see your smiling faces. We want to see your signs. We want to be encouraging to you guys and have you guys encourage us as well in this time. But it's a way for us to just love on you guys in this very difficult time. So we hope that you guys will come out on Thursday from 5 to 6:30. We're going to be doing our drive-through dinner, and we hope to see you guys for that. But as we dive into our devotional for today, we're really excited to offer a new series for our devotionals that Pastor Terry and I are going to be doing based in the Psalms. We really believe that the Psalms are perfect for this day and age and for this pandemic that we're going through. So we want to dive in and we want to look at those in our time and in the series that we're going to be doing. I think Carl Trueman offers us a great quote on the Psalms, and let me read it for you today. He says this, in the Psalms, God has given the church a language which allows it to express even the deepest agonies of the human soul in the context of worship. What he's saying is this, is that the Psalms are raw and they're real and they're genuine. They give us people at their lowest and people at their highest. And what it does is it shows that even in our lowest, even in our highest, even in those mundane times, that we can worship God. As we looked at a couple weeks ago in the message from our New Hope series, we see that the hope is what inspires our worship in difficult times. And that's what we see in the book of the Psalms and that hymn book that we have for the Bible. So I'm going to be looking at Psalm 77 today. So if you have your Bibles, you can open up to that. And we'll be diagnosing and breaking down that psalm and what the psalmist is teaching us in light of what he's written down in this psalm. But before we do, I just want to give you a little history and a little background information into who I am. I am a guy who loves military history. I love studying battles and the strategic thought and just the personalities that are involved in different key battles and wars that took place in history. And I think that it's so interesting to see these great minds as they were looking to just gain upper hands on different people. And one of my favorite battles of all time is the Battle of the Alamo. I've read a lot about this, and I really enjoy reading the history of this, that as the Texans came to the stronghold that was the Alamo, there's all of these personalities that converge there in the Alamo. Personalities like Davy Crockett, the king of the wild frontier, this rugged man who just was a man's man and a really cool guy that made his last stand at the Alamo. And then you have a guy like Jim Bowie who is helping lead the troops there that have assembled at the Alamo, and he's the ultimate founder of the Bowie knife. So you have all these really cool guys that are there that made their last stand together at the stronghold in Texas. That as Santa Anna and the Mexican army came up upon them and ultimately overtook them after days of fighting, we see that out of that battle arose a very interesting battle cry. It was, "Remember the Alamo." That Texans all across the state, as they fought for their independence from Mexico, they would chant, "Remember the Alamo." That as they chanted that, what they were recounting was the tenacity and just the strength and the spirit of these men as they stood against the Mexican army. That when times got harder, battles got hard, what they would do is they would chant, "Remember the Alamo," and they would do that so that they would be inspired to fight harder in that difficult circumstance. And I think that when we look at Psalm 77 today, that is our remember the Alamo cry for us as Christians, that the psalmist is calling us to remember certain aspects of who God is, that in our difficulty and in our circumstances and in these tragedies that we face, we can remember who God is, and that will inspire us to fight harder in these tragedies. So I want to go ahead and read it for you today. Psalm 77, starting in verse 1, it says this. It says, "I cry aloud to God, and He will hear me. In the day of my trouble I seek the Lord. In the night my hand is stretched out without wearying. My soul refuses to be comforted. When I remember God I moan. When I meditate my soul faints. Selah. You hold my eyelids open. I am so troubled that I cannot speak. I consider the days of old, the years long ago. I said, let me remember my song in the night. Let me meditate in my heart. Then my soul made a diligent search. So the psalmist opens in this passage by giving us a window into his tragedy. He's using very vivid and descriptive words to describe the situation that he's in and how he's feeling about it. He says, my soul refuses to be comforted. He's in such tragedy and such weakness that his soul is just refusing to be comforted by anything. Nothing is going to be there to help him. He says, you hold my eyelids open, that he is so weak because of this tragedy and this whatever he's going through. He says that the most simplest of tasks of just blinking your eyes and keeping them open, that takes no muscles at all. He says, you need to hold my eyes open because I'm so weak. And he says, I'm so troubled that I cannot speak. When we hear that, and we think through our own lives, we think through the tragedies and difficulties that we've been through, maybe we felt similar to the psalmist here. We felt like there's been days in tragedy and in loss, and maybe even in this pandemic, where we felt like we were just weak. We didn't have the strength to open our eyes. We didn't have the strength to even speak. We just couldn't be comforted. No matter what people did, there was nothing that could comfort us. The psalmist is describing dire situation here. And as he describes that, I think it's interesting that it never tells us what the situation is. Because I think if it was a specific situation, they would have a specific application. But what the psalmist is saying is that this is a very broad application, that there are many things that can make us feel this way and be dire circumstances for us. And I think that this pandemic can be one of those. But what he's saying is that this dire situation then leads him to a very important part of the psalm where he gets to a very important line of questioning. The situation that he's in is leading him to question certain attributes and aspects of who God is. And I think that's important. So let's pick it up in verse 7. He says, will the Lord spurn forever and never again be favorable? Has his steadfast love forever ceased? Are his promises at an end for all time? Has God forgotten to be gracious? Has he in anger shut up his compassion? Selah. So we see that the circumstances that this psalmist is in is dire, and that dire circumstance leads him to question different things about who God is. He says, God, are you never going to be favorable to us again? God, is your steadfast love gone from us? God, did you forget to be gracious towards us? That he's asking these real and raw and genuine questions about who God is because of his situation. And maybe when you've been in a tough situation, you've kind of thought through these questions as well. And if you verbalize these questions, people might have thought, well, why are you wrestling so much? But deep in your innermost being, you knew that you were weak and you were struggling. The psalmist bears his soul here and bears his questioning in his heart. But I think that there's an important part of the psalm here, and it's the word Selah. That word Selah, we really don't know a lot about it in our modern day translations. And in fact, there's many translators who just remove them from the Psalms. And I think that they miss something by removing them, because Selah is an important word that many commentators believe is a cause for pause. What he's saying is that he's describing a situation, he's describing the line of questioning that he has for God, but then he pauses, almost as if to listen to who God is and listen to what God is going to speak into his life and how he's going to encourage him in this time. And that Selah is important because out of this pause, the psalmist comes with a strategy. And that strategy is found in verse 11. He says this, I will remember the deeds of the Lord. Yes, I will remember your wonders of old. And then he spends the rest of the psalm recounting the wondrous God that he serves, the mighty God that he serves, that greatness that accompanies who God is. You see, what he's saying is that his situation hasn't changed. His line of questioning hasn't changed, but how he's coping with this is he's running to remember who God is. He's running to remember what God has done in his life, and that's motivating him to worship God. So as we look at our circumstances. I think that the psalmist is speaking very truly to us in 2020, that as we look at our circumstances and the unforeseen nature of this pandemic, or the loss of a loved one that you might be wrestling with, and the situation where you feel like you're just weak, and you might even be asking the same questions that the psalmist is asking, what he's saying is that the way that we get through that is we remember what God has done. We remember His faithfulness. We remember His wondrous works in our lives, and that motivates us to worship. That motivates us to come to a deeper understanding of who God is in light of our circumstances, in light of the dire situation that we might be in. But I think this even more importantly even speaks to our older generations and even our families as parents. As you lead your family, you're going to have students and children that are wrestling with deep questions and anxiety and fear and depression in light of the current circumstances. They're wrestling with what's going to happen with the rest of their school year. They're going to wrestle with what's going to happen next year for school year, or what's going to happen in college. And they're wrestling with all these questions. And as they do that, they fall into anxious times and depression. And as leaders of your households, you can be the one who boldly declares to your family, I will remember the wondrous works of the Lord. And as people who have lived on this earth a lot longer than some of our students and some of our children, you have more opportunities to share the wondrous works of our God. You have more opportunities to share how God has been faithful and steadfast in your life, and let that be motivation for them as they go through their trial, that God will still remain steadfast and faithful in their time as well. You see, the psalmist is telling us that through our difficulty, we can worship God by remembering how He has been faithful in our lives. So as you go through these difficult times, remember God's faithfulness. Remember His goodness. Remember His steadfastness. And I pray that would encourage you in this difficult time that we're in, that you would be encouraged with who God is, and that coming out of this tragedy, coming out of this pandemic, that you would have a deeper and greater love and understanding for the God whose deeds you remembered in those difficult times. Stay safe. We love you, and we can't wait to be back with you soon.